Hi there, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us for this APMG International webinar. It's Mark Constable here. I hope you're all keeping well during these turbulent times. Certainly no stranger to those times myself, having just returned from furlough leave last week, so I do apologise in advance if there's any rustiness in my delivery. But today we are taking through a taster session for the Agile Change Agent course and certification. It's a course that's proven very popular, and it's focused on helping individuals and teams to plan and manage change effectively, particularly in an agile environment. And that's particularly relevant today on two key levels, I guess. So the first being the agile working environments are increasingly commonplace nowadays, and secondly, levels of change seem to rise continuously, and levels that the coronavirus challenges will no doubt accelerate for many of us. As organisations continue to adapt. So very relevant course, very relevant certification. And joining me today and your presenter for the session is Melanie Franklin. Melanie's the course's lead architect and chief examiner, so really no better person to take you through a taster during this session. Just before I hand over to Melanie to start on the detail, just a little bit of housekeeping before we get going. So the first point to note is we are recording the webinar, and everyone that's registered will receive a follow-up email once we've got the recording and slides online, which should be some point tomorrow. Secondly, you are welcome to submit questions at any stage throughout. I'd encourage you to get those in early. There's no need to wait till the end when we get to the Q&A session. And we've got a couple of poll questions which will almost straight after this introduction, so do look out for those. Unless you're on a mobile device, you probably won't see them. And last but not least, we welcome feedback on the webinars. We're always hoping to improve as we go, so any feedback is really valuable and helps us to do that. So you'll have my email address from the registration emails and also the follow-up email that you'll get tomorrow. So that's it as an introduction. So without further ado, I'll welcome Melanie. Welcome, and over to you.
Thanks very much. I haven't got an agenda slide. We're going to dig straight in. I'm going to talk about who the course is for. So it seems very sensible for Mark to run a poll that asks you a little bit about what you do for a living and also what you're qualified in. So 2 quick polls over to Mark.
Yeah, so first one's open now. So which category best aligns with your current role? So we've got 4 choices there: project and program management, change management, line management, or something else. Votes are coming in quick. It's mostly a split mail between PPM and change management. So it's currently hovering around 43% project and program management, 36% change. Just a few, 4% at line management, and 18% other.
Well, welcome to the other. Thank you very much. That's lovely. And let's do the qualifications one.
And second one, so which qualification or qualifications do you currently have? So again, a few options: agile qualifications only, change only, both or neither. More of an even split here. So currently around 27% agile, 30% change, 15% both, 26% neither.
Okay, well, congratulations to the 15% who are both then. Well done. That's kind of a good achievement. Let's talk about, therefore, put this in the context for you guys. So who is the course for? Well, actually, the world that we live in, there are 2 parts. First of all, there's everybody who has a day job, effectively servicing customers. So people who run the business day to day, they've got operational roles, customer facing roles. So they can be in a sales function, they might well be doing something in the back office, but ultimately the thing about them that's really interesting is that their priorities are to get things done. So they're using the existing ways of working, and that's what they do to satisfy customer demand. They also have a responsibility to improve that. Whatever the way they're working at the moment, they have to make it go better, because we're not static anymore. Their run the business is a combination of, can I do the job, but also can I see improvements? So it's a continuous improvement responsibility. They might have the title of change agent, but often people don't. But there is an underlying responsibility to mobilise themselves and their colleagues to come up with ideas, to participate in change, and generally come up with these innovations and ideas that will make things better. And therefore, they have to make sure that they integrate change into current ways of working. So ultimately, these people here are impacted by change. But we also don't forget that there's a whole community, and judging by the percentages, over half of you are from that community today who are on this side. It's our job, either in the project and program management world or in the change management world. We are here to introduce new ideas. We might be leading on the strategy for a transformation. We might be helping to facilitate the brainstorming of what's in the scope of that transformation. We're identifying all the activities needed to manage that transformation. So our day job is actually about making change happen. Now, I think it's really important that we recognise that in this world, we've both got to work together, and those in run the business might have a very different perspective on change than those of us on the right-hand side. Because if you are doing the day job, there is nothing more irritating than being told that you've got to do it differently. So what change means is it's at least a disruption, but it also triggers fear and annoyance. It leads to a slowdown in your ability to get something done because you're having to sort of give up your existing ways of working and take on something new entirely. And I think there's also this piece about it changes a disruption because the people that we work with operationally, so line management and other operational roles, the thing is their day job, they've got to get done. Customers have deadlines, but we're also asking them to have their foot in both camps and actually help us sort of make change happen, to be an agent of change. And I think the issue is that therefore we're asking them to do two jobs for the price of one. I mean, I'm in the middle of a restructuring at the moment. I've spent all day on it. My head hurts. And one of the conversations I've been having with one of the directors today is about the restructuring of division, where we are making it very plain to people that their job is two halves. 50% get the day job done, 50% keep thinking of ways to improve the day job. So we're putting on the agenda that they've got these two jobs, and yet we're recognizing that they're already under a huge amount of pressure to get the day job done. So you can appreciate that perhaps change isn't the exciting thing that those of us on the right hand side are in. We're incentivized, we're excited, we're motivated to make change happen because actually it's what we excel at. It's what we've chosen to be our profession. So effectively, two very different parts of the community have to come together when it comes to change. And what I try to make sure of is that this course is actually developed to service both sides. So I've tried to make sure that all the materials are simple and intuitive, so that first of all, the assumption is you don't need to be an agile expert. You don't need to be a change management expert. You can come from a background of operational management. You can come from a background of project, program, or change management. It doesn't matter. We just recognize that actually we're all going to be collaborating together. So let's try and make something that isn't full of jargon, isn't methodological. So that actually, oh, well, I use Prince 2, or I use Scrum, or I use Scaled Agile Framework to run something. I've tried to basically take the best of all of those methodologies, and I'm trained in all of them. I have qualifications coming out my ears. So I tried to make sure that ultimately that's something that's really usable for everyone. So that was my first starting point. The thing that I also wanted to make sure of is that it's based on agile lines, and agile, the quick way to look at agile is that agile is an evolving solution. It's about an emergent change. We think we know where we're going, so we put some changes in place to get there. But we consistently have to do horizon scanning because actually the end goal where we think we're going does continue to change. Whether it's COVID, which none of us had any control over, that has actually changed this year, or whether it's a regulatory change, or something inside the organization where we've realized that we want to launch new products and services, or we want to be more customer focused, or we want to be more efficient. Whatever it is, things pop up as we're going along. So we do recognize that really what we've got to do is pivot each time. So the agile approach is we're putting in place waves of change. So we recognize that we've got people that we need to collaborate with. We know that we've got to edge towards the solution. So what I wanted to give you was a really simple way of making sure that from this course material, you can actually do things. The big emphasis on this course is about practical application. What it is not making you learn a whole load of, let's say under a particular role heading, a lot of responsibilities, or under a document name, all of the suggested content, sort of line by line by line that you must put in, because there's a recognition that the way that we work today is perhaps more flexible. The big transformation I'm running at the moment, nobody has a background in project management or change management. There's very little structure because it doesn't really suit the culture of the organization. They are very much a family that works very closely together. This is a global business though, so there's informality, but they still get things done. They get things done in their way. So I didn't want to lay down the law with these course materials. And I know, because I've been on a lot of these methodology courses where you learn exactly how something should be. But of course, then you come up against its practical application and it doesn't really work like that in practice. So what I try to do is put that aside and just create materials for you that teach you how to do things, not exactly what you should be doing or when you should be doing it, but much more about exactly how. What techniques can you use to make a difference? Because at the end of the day, we actually get paid for making a difference. So let's have a look at how this works. So simple structure, intuitive structure, hopefully, but coupled with powerful techniques. So the first thing I've done is, that's core to the course, is something called a roadmap. Now, you could have called it a plan. You can call it a framework. You can call it whatever you like, because the course is all about you calling things whatever you like. But effectively, it's taking this idea of agile, of waves of change, and it's saying, chunk it up. Now, we know that there's always been chunks. In Prince 2, for example, we have stages. In managing successful programs, we've had tranches. And to be honest, we've got increments and we've got sprints from the agile world. But basically, we've got this revolving piece. We're always trying to emerge to the right answer. So I've used the word iterations. And basically, each one has an outcome. So the star represents the outcome from that iteration. And I think that's another thing we need to concentrate on in Agile. It's not what you do, it's what you achieve by the end of doing it. So we don't get excited about all of the activities you might be going through, because they are relevant to the kind of organization you're in. If you're in a very hierarchically driven organization, there is going to be a lot more form filling. There's going to be a lot more formal presentations in meetings and waiting for decisions than if you're in a more informal organization. But there's not a lot you can do about that. You have to roll with the culture that you've got. But at the end of the day, what we're interested in is, are you absolutely clear what it is you should have achieved? What difference can you make? So interested in making sure there's an outcome for every iteration. And so this roadmap lays out the steps that you might follow. And what I've done is create something that's really simple, that applies to any kind of change. Because this is the other thing. We're getting a little bit more sophisticated now. Mark, in his introduction, identified that, first of all, we have so much more agile working. It's becoming more of the norm, and that we have so much more change. So we recognize that actually there's change everywhere. And I didn't want to create any kind of approach that implies, oh, this is for system-based change, IT-based change, or, well, this is the kind of process sort of reorganization or restructuring kind of change. That this roadmap is applicable for any type of change. So it's just really simple. And I use it all the time. At the moment, I started last night planning a new product rollout for a client where I've got about 2 months to do this. But at the same time, I've got another client where I'm using it for a massive cultural change where everybody who works in the organization, they're going to ask to adopt new attitudes, new values, and to see the world in a slightly different way. So whether in this case it's cultural change or a product launch, it works pretty well because we've stripped it back to the bare essence. So iteration 1 is special because what iteration 1 is doing is effectively trying to establish the meaning, the purpose, and the scope of the change so that we understand, well, why on earth do we need to make this change happen? What's actually changing? So iteration 1 is the start of your roadmap. It's a one-off iteration. We always have to step back and go, right, let's organise our work, let's have a think. So whether you've got a 10-week product rollout like me, where you hold back maybe a week for sort of trying to nail down the general sort of scope and benefits, or whether or not you've got 6 months where you might give yourself a couple of weeks for iteration 1. The key thing is that you're concentrating on really answering some big questions. So what we have in iteration 1 is different to, I've put a sort of line around iteration 2 onwards. Because of course, whatever time you've got, you divide that up into chunks because each of those chunks is part of that emerging, evolving change. So very much the agile concept of, right, let's do a little bit because we can get that out the door, get people up and running on it, and then we can get to the next bit. So it's the opposite of a more traditional approach where we gather all the requirements up front, we knit them all together and then say, this is your delivery date in 9 months, 12 months, whatever. Here, the emphasis is very agile. So everything is driven by the agile concepts. And part of this is that we want early and frequent return on investment. So can we chunk up the work and think of something simple that we can do as easy as possible, as quickly as possible, that would make a difference? Because that's the thing. We want an outcome that makes some kind of positive difference at the end of each of these iterations. So your roadmap will be very much dependent on how much time you've got, how you can decompose your ultimate change into, okay, how can I launch this? What is it that I can do? So with my product launch, for example, what I've been doing is trying to look at the ultimate product that we'll give to the customer. And I'm thinking, is there anything simple, early, that we can give to the customer that they will find useful, that they'll want to pay for, and actually will start to tie them in to the idea that they're waiting anxiously for the next delivery because the first delivery was so useful to them. So there is something there about the psychology of change, which is if you've had an early and sort of quite small scale but positive experience of the change, you'll be looking out for the next bit eagerly. So maybe creating some motivation early. So when it comes to iterations 2, 3, and 4, it's all about chunking up the time and making sure that each of those chunks adds some value. So that's our overall roadmap. Let's have a look at iteration 1. Now, what I have not done in this course is try to give you every single document under the sun that you might possibly create, because all of the programs that I am running all have different documentation requirements, and the documentation is usually called something different. But what I've done is I've tried to just simplify it and say, look, whatever you're running, you're still going to need to say what the scope of the change is. What exactly is it that you're changing? And can you describe what you're not changing? So sometimes people will call that the vision statement. Sometimes they'll call it a blueprint. Sometimes they'll just call it some kind of specification or scoping statement. It doesn't matter what it's called. You start with the scope. You have to be able to say, this is what we're going to change. This is what we're going to leave alone. And then what we want to get to, because we're very interested in benefits because they're quite motivational, but also if I understand the value of each of the things in my scope, I can do what's really important in an agile world, which is I can prioritize them. Because if I've got iteration 2 and 3 and 4, the thing is, I want to put the most valuable, most useful thing as early as possible, because then my customers will love it and they'll want more. So I'm always looking to prioritize the scope based on benefits. And I also recognize, though, that those benefits are going to excite the people that are impacted by the change. Those people on the right-hand side we looked at earlier who have the day job, but also those of us in project and change roles who want to know we're making a difference, a really useful difference. So benefits has prioritization and it has motivation at its heart. So in iteration 1, we try to answer these key questions at a high level, recognizing that we will have to come back and review whatever we've answered at the end of every iteration, because the world changes. We saw in that emerging or evolving solution slide, the world doesn't stay static. So we should always go back and revisit these key questions. But let's use a little bit of time at the start of the initiative to actually get this nailed down. The other thing I've put in is I've used the word strategy, but you could equally use the word approach or charter. But I've given you a sort of change management strategy. The idea of, can you work out before you get started how on earth you're going to manage this initiative? Who are you going to work with? How are you going to free them up from their day jobs to have enough time to work with you? What exactly are their responsibilities? How do you take decisions? How do you share information? And in this post-COVID time, how do we work together? Are we working from home? Are we coming into the office some days? How are we actually planning to do things? So the scope should lead to both the benefits and the strategy. And then if we've answered this all correctly, then we should get motivation. So the other thing that you'll find that runs throughout this course isn't just the consideration, if you like, the structural answers to things, but in the strategy, how on earth are you going to manage this? We talk about creating an environment that enthuses people, inspires people to want to participate and want to get involved. So we are going to be looking, and I'll give you a bit more detail in a moment, in the people side of change, not just the sort of the structural side, if you like. So iteration 1, always the same. For any kind of change, let's answer the basic questions. Then what we do, coming back to our roadmap, so we know that we've done iteration 1, and that should give us a feeling of purpose, that we've got the right scope, and that therefore that has meaning, that makes people want to get involved because they're going, this is a good use of my time, and that it's valuable. So effectively what we've created, I suppose, is the ingredients of that intrinsic motivation, that internal fire that says, I want to do this because it's the right thing to be doing. So there are lots of techniques in this course. The whole thing about it is not that you've listened to me tell you what you need to do, but we as a group have actually practiced. Well, how do you do it then? So there are things like the benefits dependency networks, a very, very popular technique on the course. We talk about the questions to pose. So we don't just think we need to work collaboratively with a group. We sort of set the agendas. We come up with checklists of questions. In the Agile Change Management book that this course is based on, there are lots of sort of questionnaires that you can sort of use. And in fact, as part of the course materials, you can use, you'll be sent, some of these as sort of Word documents. So you can not only sort of have all the work done for you, but you can get in there and change the wording to be a bit more reflective of your own culture of the organization. So it's really about these techniques. We do a community map technique, which is about considering who your stakeholders are and all the different roles that they play. So lots of techniques in how we do iteration 1. And then we get on to iteration 2 and 3 and 4 and 5, or however many you've got. And these iterations, it's the same pattern. we go through a pattern of discovering and planning the work, getting the work done, and then implementing the work. And of course, the thing that we're looking for here is we're bringing together both the tangible output. So we might be working with project teams where the project team is creating something that did not exist before. So I'm currently working with a team who are going to be delivering me an app. It happens to be in for medical, for hospitals, and what they're delivering is an app that's around patient admission, so that we, if we're patients at the hospital, can go in and as we're sort of going to the hospital, we fill in some of our details. So it's our responsibility to share our key information. So that's the output. But of course, what we've got to do is help patients learn that they are now responsible for their own data and that we want them to fill in the app, as opposed to sort of giving them maybe a paper-based form when they first arrive at the hospital. So we've got to address the behavioural change there. And what we're doing in the iteration, in order to get an outcome that's useful, is that we not only create the app, but we've also got to go through all the changes in ways of working to actually get it into use. So we need to do lots on advertising it to the customers, explaining it to the patients, if you like. But also we have to look at the reception staff in the hospital. We have to look at the theatre nurses who are relying on the information, and that changes their job, because instead of getting a paper-based form, which is difficult to disinfect, what they're now doing is they are looking at information on their tablet. So they are getting that sort of live information that is easy to read. So we've got that transition curve, as you can see here. What we're doing is we're thinking about getting the output created from the project team, and all of those of us involved in the change are thinking about, well, how do we create these new ways of working, and how do we stop us working in the old ways, and how can we practice these new ways of working until they become the new norm? And we do that for every single iteration. So each iteration is a mixture of both the output and the behavioural change. So that's how you get an outcome that's useful, because we know that if you deliver something from the project team, it's fantastic. We know that the project team will have delivered something that they've tested. So we know that it's got the features, it's got the functionality that we asked for. It works. But that, we know, is only part of the story, because whatever this new thing is, we will have to change how we work. We have to change the steps in the process, or who does the process, when the process is done, what the inputs or outputs for the process actually are, the KPIs to measure the success of the process. Whatever the process is, that will have to change as well. And what this course does is teach us that in order to deliver outcomes at the end of every iteration, we need to bring the two together. So you'll find that this course is relevant for those on the project side who are creating the tangible change, but also those on the business side who are responsible for adopting the new ways of working, so adapting how they do things. So those are the iterations, and what you'll find is that, as I've just said, this course is tailored for different roles within change, whatever our responsibilities. And one of the core things that we're going to be talking about in the course materials is collaboration. How do we work together? How do we create an environment that inspires people to want to get involved? So again, coming back to the techniques that are a core part of this course, you'll find that there's an awful lot of how to do it, not just talking about it's really important to have trust in relationships, or it's really important to understand who your stakeholders are. Yeah, but how am I going to do that? Give me some ideas, give me some tips, give me some tricks, give me some techniques that you know work in practice. So you'll find that there is the course has an emphasis on relationship building at the top of this slide here, and also the providing the right kind of environment, and we sort of come together around this idea of empathy. But there's an awful lot for you to do, where you can discover your own preferences in personal awareness and think about how you come across to others, how they might come across to you, and I get you thinking about where are you on the spectrum of how you like to work versus one of your key stakeholders. And the secret to this is that whatever the gap is between you two, if you want to make change happen, you're going to have to maybe change the way you want to do things to meet the preferences of that other stakeholder. So we look at the real practicalities of actually building a relationship. I'm sick of those courses that tell me how important stakeholder engagement and communication are, yeah, but without telling me how to actually do it. We also look at a very popular part of the course, which is around building up our personal leadership, because ultimately what we want throughout the roadmap is we want people to follow our lead, follow our role modeling, follow our examples. So what we have to do is make ourselves a very sort of powerful magnetic force. So what we do is we build up that sort of leadership that people think of us as a leader. It's not hierarchical. So it's looking at all the elements of excellent leadership, like trustworthiness, flexibility, self-control. And we look at how we actually make those happen. How do we work on ourselves? So there's a big thread of personal responsibility, personal development, self-improvement that's running through this, definitely. And then we look at how do we create an environment that supports ourselves and also supports others. So we look at quite a lot around the neuroscience of change, and we look at the school of positive psychology and how important it is for us, using the benefits that we would have identified earlier on, to maintain our motivation and our enthusiasm, and how we convey that to others. And we create an environment that's very attractive to others, that people feel that it provides them with motivation, and it provides them with encouragement, and it helps them overcome their fears. So there's quite a lot on the techniques of how do you build a way to actually get this work done. So you start to see that everything here is really the theme of the course is learn by doing, not by listening. So you can see in here that there are some sessions, things on concept and roadmap and business need, but you can see the pale orange blocks in here are all about the activities that we do, the techniques that we do, and actually sort of how do we, there's questionnaires in there, there's techniques in there. So you actually learn how to do something. And I think that is, in a way, absolutely critical for training now. I wrote an article last night that's been sort of shared around the world, which was about the importance of training. Now, so many people are working from home. One of the things that we look for, that we miss when we're not working face to face with people, is to learn from others and to be inspired by others, and just missing the opportunity when I'm face to face with someone just to mention how I'm feeling about a problem, and just by talking about it to them, I might see it from a different perspective, or they might give me some advice about how they might have handled it. That's very difficult to replicate from home, those sort of accidental learning opportunities. And I think that increasingly with training, training will bridge that gap, and give us an opportunity to continue to learn. What I've been worried about working from home for 6 months now is that you worry about stagnating. Where's the input? Where's the new ideas coming from if I'm not getting a chance to brainstorm that with lots of other people? So I think that training generally is proving to be even more important than it's been before, because it is a way of inspiring people, exciting people. But I think it's also a way of building confidence. You can benchmark your own ideas, you can share them with others, you can collaboratively build on them, you can get solutions to your problems, you can learn how to do stuff, and just by learning some of these new techniques, you come up with new ideas of how they might work in your situation. So I think there is something around looking for training these days that is less theoretical and more practical. That can you do something at the end of the course that you could not do before, not just that you can know something. Because I think increasingly, if I want to know something, I'll read that in a book. If I want to learn something, I want a training course that's structured to help me build a skill and be able to practice that skill. So that's what you should be looking for from your Agile Change Agent course. And I passionately believe it does deliver that. Let's just double check the relevance to your role. So I know that there's a lot of you on change, and we had sort of 36% were from the change world, 30% were from the project management world, and then we had sort of 22% from line management and other roles. So let's have a look at the relevance. So if you happen to be from the world of change management, we know that what you're responsible for is your scoping and planning large-scale change against a portfolio of other change initiatives. You need to identify the behaviours for enabling the change. You coach people and individuals through the change, and you provide a bridge between the projects and programme and the business to ensure that everything's planned, tailored and completed. So you enable the business to embed an agreed change and therefore to realise benefits. So you'll find a lot in here about the roadmap, using the business need section of the course to identify the benefits, using the relationship building and the environment chapters to help you really sort of build the strong relationships that you need. So even if you're an experienced change practitioner like me and you know all the theories and models, I guarantee you'll still get something out of the course because you'll learn new techniques about how to do some of these things. If you're from the project management world, then you have accountability for really the quality of the deliverables and the fact that they need to be implemented on time to cost and quality standards. And that what you need to do, and increasingly we are putting a lot of pressure in project management and program management for not just delivering, but you need to make sure that you have a wider remit of making sure that whatever it is you've created, you and your team, it's implemented and adopted by the business. Because the thing we know is that unless something is adopted and becomes the new way of working, then the business gets no benefit. I can't save money if we've redesigned a process and made it more streamlined and automated elements of that process if none of the staff are actually then following the new process. If they haven't adopted it as the new way of working, then we don't get the cost savings that we had initially identified in our business case. And finally, line managers. Well, the thing is, they're implementing new ways of working across whatever their discipline, whether it's finance or HR or marketing or any of the operational roles, customer service roles, you name it. That's their job, along with, making sure that, people are really interested to embrace new technologies, new processes, and to actually change and improve their ways of working. So there's an awful lot in the course which is about this relationship building and creating the right environment, the right atmosphere that inspires people to want to come on board and want to take part. And I think, therefore, for the line manager, there's a lot in the course. For the project manager who's creating these deliverables and trying to work out how on earth do I get them adopted? How do I persuade people? Very similarly to the line manager role, there are lots of techniques in there which talk about motivation. We talk about overcoming resistance to change and the fears, and we use a lot from the worlds of behavioural economics, positive psychology and neuroscience, and all the latest thinking to turn that into the practicalities. I attend psychology lectures every single week. I am very lucky to be mentored by some fantastic people around the world. And part of my job in continuing my own learning is because I'm running big change programs, I'm constantly turning what they're telling me theoretically into practical techniques. So I have to be honest, the course I keep adding to what's in the course to make it as relevant as possible. And I would say that one of the things that we've also had to look at in this post-COVID world is that so many more people are now working from home. So many more leaders are leading virtual teams, that, all of that is reflected in the course materials to bring it right up to date. And that, I think, is why the feedback has been so very good. I'm delighted because I am responsible for this product. These are genuine comments that I pulled off of sort of Trustpilot, so all sort of anonymous, but also just what people have said. I love the fact that people think it's the best investment they've made in their career in a long while. I think that's fantastic. I love the fact that people feel that they've left the course with real life practical examples and tools, that people think it's hugely practical. And I love that. I'll refer back to the visuals for years to come. I think that's fantastic, because I know then that the course is being used. It's not just something you went on but you can't remember, that it's actually stuff that you're going to be using and making a difference. So at the end of the day, you can be sure that if you come on the course, if you know nothing about Agile, you know nothing about change, you'll be brought up to speed. If you know a lot about both of those subjects or either of those subjects, then you'll see them in a new practical light. So I'm confident that everybody is getting what they need from the course. It's been a big ask to try to create course material that addresses the needs of very different audiences, but I can see that it's working in practice and we're getting the feedback to support that, which is why it's such a popular course. So I'm guessing that either we'll have a short end to this because nobody's raised any questions, or Mark's going to interrogate me. Which one is it going to be, Mark?
Interrogations follow.
Okay, off we go then.
Okay, so the first one goes back to, well, it's referencing the iteration 1 stage. So the different stakeholders are likely to have different benefits, or each benefits would have a different amount of value to the different stakeholders. How would you prioritize those differences? Is this something that the benefits dependency network would help with?
Yes, absolutely. You have to look at the benefits through the perspective of everybody on your community map. And one of the things we can't ignore, by the way, in benefits is that there are also disbenefits for certain groups. And sometimes what we have to be honest about and empathetic about is the fact that some groups are definitely not getting benefits, whereas other groups are. How on earth do you motivate in that situation? Because what you're actually asking is the group that's experiencing the disbenefits, you're asking them to sort of take one for the team, and sort of say, I know you're losing quite a lot, but the organisation somewhere over here is gaining quite a lot. And I think that at the heart of all of this, at the end of the day, if you want to be your most persuasive self, you have to be authentic, and you have to be trustworthy. And part of the benefits analysis is, first of all, identify for yourself where you think this change stands, and then work with others in these simple, intuitive techniques to help them articulate whether they are experiencing benefits or disbenefits. Get them talking about their motivation. And if it's disbenefits, then get them to identify, well, why on earth would you make this change happen? And you will find that there's enough in here to keep you authentic and to ensure that your engagement with people who are affected by change at, with different sort of levels of benefit are still coming on board. So yeah, absolutely, we will look at that through the benefits dependency network.
Great, thanks for that. Leads on quite nicely to the next question. So Mary says, the emotional piece is interesting and positive, but for many change is negative. Their jobs are de-skilled, diminished, have less interaction. What does this approach have to say about handling this, where positive psychology might sound crass or insensitive?
Yeah, I certainly don't think that, whilst the one thing I will say is that this course is informed by theories and models from psychologists around the world. But what you are not going to be sat through, by the way, is a lecture on all of these different theories and models and what they are. If you want to understand the academic underpinning of the course, I would happily engage in discussion with anybody outside of the course, so that you can be reassured. But at the end of the day, this is turning things into very practical things. And I would say that one of the most common changes that I'm involved in at the moment is a redundancy. And redundancy brings dreadful fear and negativity to those who are experiencing it. If you're doing a consultation on sort of 100 people and knowing that 25 of them have got to lose their jobs, but what you've done is you've created fear and anxiety across the full 100. And of course, outside of that 100, everybody else in the organization, where they can see that there's a restructuring taking place and there's a shrinking of the jobs available. So we are in for some very negative times, I think, across the world. We've seen the contraction of economies. So how on earth do you motivate people to get on board with that kind of change? Well, again, I think it comes back to the fact that it's going to be happening. Can we make it the best possible experience in terms of preparing people for the other side? So it is about looking at the impact on these people and saying, right, what's the impact on if you're losing your job? What are your greatest fears? What is the risk? How can we ameliorate some of these fears? How can we put things in place for you that will minimize the negative impact? So whatever the change is, if it's not positive for somebody, then what we have to do is we have to be, first of all, you have to start from a position of honesty. You have to back that up with empathy. Empathy is not sympathy, by the way. Empathy is about understanding, appreciating those negative thoughts, and almost walking in the shoes of those people and thinking, well, okay, if this were happening to me, how might I fix it for myself? Let's see if we can collaborate on trying to put in place some strategies to minimize the negative impacts. So I'm sure a lot of us are involved in those kind of redundancies at the moment. It's very unpleasant for everybody, and we try to make it the best we possibly can.
Great, thanks, Matt. Next question is from Nicola, and I might need a bit of clarification on this one, but Nicola says primarily a learning and training person. Would this still be relevant for me to understand more about the overall process, trying to understand the difference between this 2-day course and the 5-day course? So I'm not sure there if Nicola is referring to an alternative 5-day course or
possibly the change management practitioner.
Possibly.
Yeah, and I think that as far as if you're in learning and development, if you want to have a discussion with me about the differences between different courses on the market, I'll happily take this offline. So if that's your question, Nicola, get hold of me via Mark or via LinkedIn. You just have to tap in Melanie Franklin and you'll see me in LinkedIn. I'm all over the place, looking like I was having a good hair day at the time. So I'll happily take that conversation offline. If you're saying I'm in learning and development, would this course be relevant for my role? Well, let's be honest that learning and development have a very important part to play in actually this, which is that, of course, when we're putting in place new outputs, project deliverables, we want people to learn a new way of working. And so actually learning and development is one of our sort of key ingredients for achieving behavioural change. So do you want to come on the course because you can learn a lot about relationship building, creating the right kind of environment and motivational tools? You might very well find that this course is incredibly beneficial for sharpening up your own skill set.
Great, thanks, Matt. And the last question at this stage is the course available online? And that's particularly relevant, bearing in mind what you've been working on recently.
So I think one of the things I said to Mark just before this webinar started is that later this week I am launching the online self-paced version of this course. I've been through my own change and transition curve over the last 6 months because I've always done face-to-face training and I love working with people. Moving that to Zoom or Google Hangouts or Microsoft Teams, depending on which platform my clients are using, has been different, but I found that, through using video, through using humanity, we're still able to create some very powerful relationships. We can do facilitation of conversations, we can share experiences, and we can learn from each other. And the feedback I've had is it's gone incredibly well. But I also recognise that there are a lot of people that with very different working arrangements and an awful lot of calls on their time, from home educating to looking after elderly parents to trying to balance, other members of the household who are working, who actually want to study in their own time. And maybe they'll sacrifice that collaboration with others in place of sort of learning for themselves. And so I've basically done a set of 27 modules, I think it is. They're all about 10 to 15 minutes each, and they are all voiced by me with all the slides taking you through every aspect. So we wanted to make sure this course was available to as many people as possible in ways that suited them. So that's what we're putting in place later this week.
So watch this space. Okay, that's all the questions we have for the moment, Mel. So I think we'll start wrapping up there. So I'll start by thanking everyone for joining. Thank you very much for taking time out of your schedules to join us. And of course, we hope we've whetted your appetite somewhat for the course and certification. And thanks as ever, Mel, for your help and support and presentation today. Last but not least, we just a reminder as well that we'll send a follow-up email, so do look out for that. I'll be aiming to get that to you tomorrow. As I said at the start, that will contain a link to the recording and slides. If you want to share that with any colleagues and associates, you're more than welcome to do that. And we'll also include some obvious links to to find out more about the course. If you didn't want to wait for that, you can just head to the APMG International website now. So that's apmg-international.com. If you do a quick search for Agile Change Agent, that'll come up quickly for you. So okay, so I think that's all. So thanks very much again, everyone. Stay safe and have a good remainder of the week ahead. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
And if you need to get hold of me, Melanie at agilechangemanagement.co.uk, or in LinkedIn, I will happily engage in any questions about this course. So thanks very much.
Brilliant. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.